Historians report that during the Great Depression in the 1930s, many elderly people were forced to survive on incredibly small food budgets, sometimes on barely more than $1 a week. In the working-class neighborhoods of major industrial cities like Chicago, some older men would cook just one large pot of a simple oat-and-onion gruel every Sunday evening. They wouldn't turn the stove on for the rest of the week, just to save on expensive gas or wood. The astonishing thing was, despite this extremely meager diet, many of them remained remarkably tough and resilient. This dish is number 4 on our list today. During the hardest economic crises of the last century, elderly people often suffered more than anyone else. For many elderly people back then, there was virtually no social safety net. Those who couldn't save often starved. Number 9 on this list was invented by grandmothers to fool hungry grandchildren into smelling a hearty Sunday roast using simple spices, even though nothing but the cheapest scraps were simmering in the pot. And number 1 uses a traditional cooking method that was a kind of home remedy for many older folks, long before modern supplements existed. Here is the raw reality of how our grandparents secured sheer survival with a single pot. These 10 meals were never about fancy plates or culinary trends. It came down to pure logic. How do I get full for a few cents without my body giving up, and without needing a lot of strength to cook? If you don't want to lose these forgotten, honest strategies of our grandparents, hit that subscribe button right now. Number 10, the vinegar and onion soup. A dish that required absolutely no fresh ingredients and warmed the stomach in the dead of winter. All you needed were 2 yellow onions, a spoonful of cheap pork lard, water, and a splash of basic apple cider vinegar. Total cost, less than a nickel. There was nothing else. The culinary trick was to simmer the onions in the lard for an eternity until they turned deep brown and sugary sweet. The heavy sweet aroma of caramelized onions would slowly drift through the cold, tiny apartment, erasing the feeling of hardship for a few hours. Many elderly people back then believed that a splash of vinegar at the end made heavy, greasy meals easier on the stomach. While restaurants today sell French onion soup for a premium, grandmothers used this stew simply to have a warm, cheap meal that kept them full and warm during brutal winters. Number 9, the mock rabbit stew. How grandmothers invented a culinary illusion to hide bitter poverty from their hungry grandchildren. When grandparents had their grandchildren over during the harsh post-war years, but there was no money for expensive meat, grandmothers resorted to a psychological trick. Into the pot went stale breadcrumbs, a couple of eggs, mashed potato, and plenty of marjoram. The clever part? Marjoram is the classic seasoning for hearty meat dishes, giving even the simplest ingredients the scent of a savory Sunday roast. The soup was simmered until it became thick and dense. The illusion worked perfectly. When that familiar, rich smell of meat filled the house, it instantly gave the hungry children a sense of security. The grandmother stretched the meal without the grandchildren ever feeling the desperation. Number 8, the salty milk rice mush. This dense porridge became as firm as bread when cold and served as pure fuel for aging workers. Single grandfathers in the industrial areas of the 1920s used this dish as a pure energy source. Cheap broken rice was boiled in heavily watered-down milk with a heavy pinch of salt until the rice absorbed all the liquid, turning into a heavy, thick paste. The salt was crucial because our sense of taste declines with age, and the warm food was easily digestible, making it gentler on aging stomachs. After it cooled, the mixture set up firm enough to cut into neat slices. The grandpas would cut it into slices, pack it into their tin lunch boxes, and take it to hard physical labor. Countless workers made it through long shifts, even when their strength was fading. It provided the necessary energy, even when their joints were already aching. We need to talk about a sad truth here that you won't find in any modern cookbook: loneliness in old age. Historical data on elderly poverty shows that seniors living alone often skip meals entirely. Not always because there was no food at all, but because cooking for one person feels pointless when your partner has passed away and the kitchen table feels far too empty. When your fingers ache from arthritis and every heavy pan becomes a torment, you quickly lose the motivation. A single, simple pot on the stove was the last saving grace for many grandparents to eat a warm meal with minimal effort and maintain their independence. The pot had to be enough. These stews didn't just fill stomachs, they preserved dignity. I'd love to know, was there a forgotten crisis meal in your family that your grandparents or great-grandparents used to talk about? Tell me about it down in the comments. I read every single one. Moving on to number 7. Number 7, lard braised cabbage, a nutritious winter lifesaver prepared entirely without a knife when hands trembled with pain. A whole head of white cabbage and a block of pork lard, that's all a grandpa with minimal support needed in the winter. Because trembling hands could no longer safely guide a heavy kitchen knife, the cabbage was simply torn into large chunks by hand and thrown into the pot with the lard. The secret was time. Hours of braising made the tough cabbage so soft you didn't even have to chew it. This was vital for grandparents with poor teeth or ill-fitting dentures. The fogged-up window panes in the kitchen and the savory smell of cabbage signaled that dinner was ready. A good feeling. The lard provided cheap calories against the cold, and cabbage was the ideal winter vegetable that kept for months in the cellar. Number 6, the stretched lentil bowl, a forgotten method that made a soup so thick without flour or starch that it kept you full for days. A cup of unpeeled brown lentils, 2 wrinkled carrots, water. Grandmothers deliberately chose not to soak the lentils beforehand. They simply boiled them in the pot for 2 hours until the skins burst on their own. This naturally thickened the soup into a rich, hearty, and nourishing meal without any added binders. For decades, lentils were considered one of the cheapest and most nutritious ways to get by without expensive meat. Elderly people with very little money often remained remarkably robust and enduring on this simple home cooking. And many made it through hard times with exactly these kinds of simple dishes. They trusted the time-tested wisdom that had guided generations before them through crises. Number 5, the hamburger pound pot, a logistical masterpiece where not a single drop of calories could go to waste. This was the strategy of grandmothers who had to stretch a single coin over an entire week. A single pound of the cheapest, fattiest ground beef, 2 cans of peeled tomatoes, and a box of cheap macaroni. Everything went into one pot. The genius part, the pasta cooked directly in the tomato sauce. That way, the noodles soaked up every bit of grease and flavor directly inside the pot. An older person could eat from this single pot for nearly a week. Nothing was wasted. And since the noodles kept absorbing the sauce over the days, the dish became even more compact, rich, and filling with every reheat. Number 4, the Pittsburgh Steelworker gruel. How a simple pot of oatmeal gruel brought older folks through brutal winters. This is the dish of the grandpa from our intro. The ingredients were radically simple: a handful of rolled oats, a diced potato, an onion, and water. Thick oatmeal was traditionally considered very gentle on the stomach, making it ideal for elderly people with sensitive digestions. The potato and onion brought flavor and essential nutrients, while the oats stuck to the ribs and kept hunger at bay. This dish proved that you can survive on an absolute minimum of money in hard times if you combine your ingredients wisely. It just worked. It wasn't comfort food, it was simply a way to endure hard times. Number 3, the classic buttermilk bread soup, a centuries-old recipe that gave new strength to aging bones without straining digestion. This historical dish shows up time and again in the old journals of pioneer grandmothers. Sour buttermilk was heated in a pot with a little flour and bulked up with stale, hard bread scraps. The buttermilk provided protein and calcium, crucial nutrients that were essential for helping keep aging bones strong. Because the hard bread softened completely in the hot pot, it created a creamy soup. The warm food was easily digestible and put very little strain on the body. The soup provided an immediate sense of warmth and fullness, especially in the winter. The stomach required almost no energy to process the food, allowing the strength to go directly where it was needed most. Number 2, the pork rind pot, a savory dish made entirely from something wealthy families would have simply thrown away. In a true grandmother's kitchen, absolutely nothing went to waste. When the bacon was gone, the tough, leathery pork rinds and scraps were saved in a clay jar in the cellar. When money ran tight at the end of the month, the grandmother boiled these rinds down with a few old potatoes and water. After hours on a low flame, a small kitchen miracle happened. The fat and gelatin dissolved out of the tough pigskin. The water transformed into a heavy, rich broth, and the potatoes broke down into a thick sauce. It cost almost nothing. There wasn't a single piece of actual meat in the pot, but it tasted incredibly savory and warmed people through on freezing days. Number 1, the golden chicken soup, a traditional home remedy that matured for hours on the stove from a tough, cheap ingredient, the absolute foundation. Grandmothers didn't buy expensive chicken meat for this. They bought a so-called stewing hen. These were old laying hens that no longer produced eggs, and their meat was as tough as leather, which made them dirt cheap, often costing just a few cents. The hens simmered on the stove for hours, bones and skin included, while the rich smell slowly spread through every room in the house. For many elderly people, this soup felt like real medicine, warm, strengthening, easy to digest, and comforting on cold days. For many families, this soup meant comfort in difficult times. The fat gathered as a golden layer on the surface, offering valuable warmth. When a grandmother cooked this soup, it was about more than just food. It was a tradition that gave new strength and life back to a chilled body. With these stews, our grandparents were never just trying to get full on the cheap. It was about defending their own dignity when the world made things incredibly hard. But that battle wasn't just fought at the kitchen table. It was also fought out on the endless highways. Far away from any family, there was a completely different world of survival. The truck drivers of the 1970s, men who sat in iron cabs for days, searching the lonely routes for food that was cheap and drove the cold right out of their bones. Some long-haul drivers even strapped foil-wrapped meals onto their engine blocks and let the highway heat cook dinner for them mile after mile. Why exactly this forgotten food became their safeguard against falling asleep at the wheel is something you'll find out right now in this video on your screen. See you over there.